The reason Angus Taylor had such a resounding win, the reason they're standing in front of Six Flags, the reason they're talking about immigration is all because of One Nation and the success the astonishing success One Nation has had in the last year by talking about these issues, bringing them to the forefront of the Australian political agenda. And One Nation deserves full credit for getting a massive up to 28% vote of the vote now, or certainly in some polls. Now, the next question is, how does a Taylor coalition work with or against One Nation? Traditionally in the past, you've had the coalition have been at loggerheads with One Nation, so they cannibalise each other's through not giving preferences to each other. That has got to stop. They've got to work together. We need the Liberals under Angus Taylor, the coalition under Angus Taylor, to work with One Nation to get solid preference deals, the way Labor and the Greens work together, so that we have a coalition on the right that is inclusive, hate that word, but you know what I mean, and actually gets into government and controls the Senate and changes this country. I just want to play you...
I still think, before you play anything, there needs to be some serious consideration about having a coalition that includes One Nation, because I think you might have some strong...
It has to be preference deals or whatever.
No, not preference deals, because I think that is a recipe for Labor to stay in power for several terms. You look at...
I think it's the opposite, actually. But anyway, carry on.
Well, no, because, one, there's not that preference discipline on the right. A lot of One Nation supporters don't want to give their preference to the Liberal Party. They hate the Liberal Party. They may end up giving their preference to Labor. So if
Labor stays in power.
If you actually do want to have the power of that centre-right coalition, you have to have a coalition, which means One Nation MPs get in cabinet. They get ministries.
100%.
So that's a real coalition, and that really is using that, because you look at the totals. You look at Labor and the Greens' primary vote, and then you look at the One Nation and the Coalition's primary vote. The centre-right got quite a comfortable margin, but then you look at the two-party preferred, and Labor's ahead.
Yeah,
my very point.
This is the other issue too with that coalition. Well, where does that leave the Nats? Because of course the seats where if One Nation was to run, in lower house seats, these would all be national seats in regional Australia. So that's a big problem there. How do you manage that? Because the Nats would not do well out of that. And we see, the Nats, the way they treated Barnaby Joyce being a great example of that animosity, not so much between the Libs and One Nation, but between the Nats and One Nation, because they're playing in a very similar space.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the Australian people want to get rid of the Labor government. That's what the Australian people want by a very, very clear majority. I would call it a 60-40 majority easily. They want Labor gone. What was the Labor vote? Was 33% at the last election. This next election will be many people sitting with the metaphorical baseball bats waiting to get Labor because of what they've done to the economy, what they've done to Australian pride and nationalism and patriotism and so on.
I do think, though, that, we're going to talk about, and a lot of people on a lot of the other Sunday shows are going to be talking about, how do the Libs and the Nats relate to One Nation and all of that.
Absolutely, it's critical.
It's a huge question, but I also think that right now, what Taylor needs to be doing right now is solely to appear to be focused on bringing the fight to Labor. That's and they shouldn't be engaging any sort of talk about this. Talks can happen in the background around this sort of thing, but at the moment, the most urgent thing for the Liberal Party to do is to take that fight to Labor and to just keep smashing. This is a terrible government. This is a really terrible government. Our interest rates are going back up. Inflation is out of control. We are heading towards a stagflationary economy, which could be a lost decade of economic growth. Our living standards are going backwards. We're taxed more than we've ever been taxed before. The deficits are hitting $1 trillion under Labor's watch, even though they falsely claimed that they were happening under the Scott Morrison government. It's all about taking that fight to Labor. That other stuff,
100%.
that can be taken care of later.